Hey everyone, it's Christopher Swan, and welcome to this week's episode of Living Your Journey. I have the amazing opportunity to chat with people that love what they do in life. They understand their passions. Maybe it's a career path or the social impact that they're making. It's kind of like they're following their North Star. Even though their story may change, they understand that they're on their journey every day. This week I talked with winemaker Garry Brooks. He and his wife founded Brooks Note Winery in Marin County, California. Garry has a great wine story that is so far from typical. This is all about following the thing you love. Garry and I chat through the different phases of his journey, going from a technology job at the Gap to going back to school and getting started in wine, to working in the wine industry, and to finally starting his own winery. We also talk about his various transitions, why they needed to happen, and how they happened, with support and real intention. It's so clear that Garry loves wine, just as clear as his love of winemaking and sharing it with everybody. I think Garry's journey is a terrific example of the power of deliberate decisions and living life with intention. Let me also mention he brought me about 2 cases of wine when he visited, so I'm a really big fan of this wine journey. Okay, here's our conversation. So welcome to the show, Garry. It's great to have you here.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Doesn't that feel a little almost awkward when you just start like that?
It does.
Like,
but
wait, we've been talking.
Wait, yeah. But I'm good. I think it's nice. You got to start somewhere.
You do. And sometimes I've started some of our conversations with, conversations with different folks. We're just jumping right in there where it's even mid-conversation. Like, well, hold on, let me just record this.
Right. I'll hit record.
Because it's brilliant. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I think everybody has such a different perspective. So it's been fun to even get a little bit of their color, the little personality. So anyways, thanks for coming. I know, I talked about, even before I even really scripted this whole thing, I mentioned it to you when I first met you. So when I mentioned that, I met you in January.
Yep.
I had to look it up. I was like, it was a few months ago.
And I remember it was fun. It was kind of rainy.
Right. There was wine involved.
There was wine.
I remember this. So, even at that point, I had the idea, but I hadn't really thought, like, what's that going to look like? So, you've almost been along for that journey as well. So it's kind of really cool that, that you have come back and now we can, really talk this through and it comes to life for me. So thanks.
You're welcome. I love to talk about my story. I mean, it's not everybody's interested, of course, but it's been a real gift for me to be able to kind of follow my dream and to do what I do, and it's really kind of taken a community to help me get here. So whenever I get a chance to, I don't know, to tell people about it and maybe share my experiences, maybe they'll get something out of it too.
Well, and that's actually why I'm really glad you're here and why I'm excited, because I think that people are going to have the same reaction that I had, which was what? Like, what did you do? Because I've actually mentioned a little bit of your story to a couple other guests who have wondered, like, well, who else is going to be on? And I said, there's this guy who's in wine and he has this whole other thing. And I mentioned, they're like, really? So it's actually been really fascinating to hear that. I'm sure this must not be new for you. You must hear these things.
It's I think it's a little bit is about just being self-aware. I don't necessarily think that what I've done has been that special. So sometimes it's kind of a shock to me when people say, "Oh man, that's really neat. How'd you do that?" And it's kind of, making wine's kind of a dirty job. It's like it could be on the Mike Rowe Dirty Job show, right?
Yeah, I can see that.
It could be on there, and it's deep into that, and so it always kind of shocks me sometimes when people are like, "Oh yeah, that's awesome."
I think it's like any kind of industry career. If you don't know about it, we just see the external, the sexy side. I have a few friends that are actors and sort of well-ish known. And it sounds super sexy because they're on sitcoms that you would probably watch. And they're like, no, it's work. Right. It's so much work. And they're like, you don't always get the part. You mostly don't get the part. And so I think there's this really non-sexy side of things, but that doesn't take it away from loving it.
Right.
It's just the other piece to it. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. So for the folks that are listening, obviously they've just heard an intro, but I just wanted to share a little bit just like one piece of information before we dive in, so they have something else to go on that. So clearly you're a winemaker, so we established the dirty part of that. And so it was you and your wife, Joanne, founded Brooks Note Winery in Marin County, and that was in 2011, I think, when you planted.
We just sort of, we our first take on it, our first try, was in 2011. So we had contracted for space, we had grapes that were coming in, and then it started raining. And it was the 2011, like it started raining in, September 1st, and the grapes weren't going to be ready until October 1st. And so it rained and it rained and it rained some more. And we ended up really not being able to make a vintage that year. And so, talk about, if something bad happens, get back up off, get back up on the horse and keep going. So we had our first shot in 2011. We ended up making some great rosé, and we made a little wine in the garage, and that was kind of about it. Okay. And then 2012 was when we really started. That was our first vintage, our first commercial vintage. Yeah.
So we're definitely. I want to go backwards at some point, but not yet, because I would love for you to just even jump forward. Tell us about your world today. Like, tell us about your winery, your wine. Like, what's that look like today?
So I'm a tiny little producer. I guess if there's lots of words, garagiste. That's probably my least favorite.
That's not my favorite.
But I know it's. I just kind of do. I do small lots of wine, and I do it all myself. So everything that happens to the wine, I do it. I buy the grapes. So we get them from a couple of just fantastic growers, and in some of the vineyards, I'll contract for an acre, and I'll get to be a little bit more involved in some of the work on the vineyard. And others, I just work with these guys that are phenomenal farmers, and I'm excited about what they're doing, but I rarely have any important input for them. But I do, we get together and we make picking decisions about sort of when the grapes are going to come in. And once they get to the winery, then it's all mine. Mm-hmm. And I make the wine, and then and there's lots to that. We can talk more about that later if you want. Yeah. But and that's really kind of just the beginning of the journey. Because then there's a lot of sales and marketing and accounting and cleaning. There's lots of cleaning. That's sort of that's mostly what I do in wine is I clean stuff. I clean things. And that's it. So it's kind of it. I have this sort of strange dichotomous life where I wear ripped up jeans and work boots about half the time, and the other half the time I have to put on a collared shirt and go out and tell people about what we do and the wines and kind of and the journey a little bit too. So
tell me a little bit more then about, so you're a small producer, you're based in Marin County, California. Yeah. What type of wines are you making?
So my heart is kind of in Pinot Noir. Like that's my thing. And that's where we started. So our first couple wines are Pinots. I make one from Marin County, and then I make another one from Weir Vineyard up in the Yorkville Highlands, which is kind of up in Mendocino. And it's phenomenal. I've been making wine for a long time, and Pinot, gosh, I guess it ends up being for about 8 years. And it just has this, I don't know, it sort of captures my imagination. And so we do that, and I would say that if I had to have a pigeonhole, it would be a Pinot. And then I also make a few reds. Like I make a rosé. Mm-hmm. I make a few. So I make the rosé, and then I also make some whites too. So I make a Chardonnay. Our first one came out this year.
That's right. I remember.
And it's good. Yeah, that's like, damn.
How was that?
It's good. It's good. And then I made a Pinot Blanc this year too. So we're starting to branch out a little bit into whites. My heart's kind of in Pinot.
Why'd you branch out then? Like, was that just you wanted to try something new, or?
A couple things. It's, one, it's when it's, so we've always made rosé. And it's not like rosé that you remember from back in the 80s where it's kind of sickly sweet and you know, it just sort of tastes like pink cotton candy. No, so I really love French rosé. And you know, on the 4 days a year when it gets scalding hot in Marin County in Northern California, you got to have something that isn't a Pinot to drink, cuz you know, you don't want to chill your Pinot and have it with lunch when it's 100 degrees outside. And that's really where the rosé comes in. I make it because I love to drink it.
That's a great reason to do it. That's a great reason to do anything, right? Do it because you love it.
Right. And it turns out that, you know, a couple of my friends, they're like, hey man, that's really good. And then, you know, and then we made a little more and we made a little more. And so rosé has been kind of, one of our things too. And then the whites, that's been kind of an evolution for me. I'm kind of an ABC guy, which that's anything but Chardonnay. And I've never been a big fan of like the big kind of buttery oaky California Chardonnays. It's just too much for me.
I remember we talking about that because that was the first thing out of my mouth when you said it. I was like, no,
that's not what this is. Well, and you know, it's like a glass of that's all right, but you know, I really want to have two. And then I started tasting some French Chablis, which is Chardonnay, and it's delicious. So I was like, oh man, I want to try to make that. And so in 2014, tried to do a little of that, and then I made a Pinot Blanc when I was at Dutton Goldfield as the assistant winemaker there, and it was so good. I just really loved it, and so I wanted to try and make something that was like that. And the Pinot Blanc this year turned out really well. I mean, you know, it's these are all things that I've done for other people before. Okay. So it's not like I was starting from scratch, but you know, when you do it and it turns out and it doesn't suck, like, you're like, oh man, that is awesome.
That's awesome. Also the Pinot Blanc too. I mean, for me, when you introduced it to me, it was newer for me, and it's just so not common compared to so many other varieties that we would find. So that's why I thought, well, there's a story there, that connection to that. But it also, I wonder for you, is it that you also just, I want to try something new. I want to try to see like what I could do with this, how it might work.
You know, I think that's part of it too. You know, and there's a minor economic reason for trying to put together one of those whites. I mean, and so I guess the other hat that I wear sometimes is, as a small business guy, you know, it's like, you know, the winery, it's a big investment in equipment. It's a big investment in inventory, you know, because the grapes cost money. It turns out that grapes cost money. And, once you've made those purchases for reds and for Chardonnay, they kind of sit there in your warehouse for 18 months before you can get them in the bottle and start doing it. And then maybe another 6 months before you're ready to start selling it. One nice thing about the rosé and the Pinot Blanc is that they hit the market within about, you know, 7 months or so of when they're made. So everybody needs something to drink during the summertime. And
I feel like these are slogans.
Right. I mean, it's a bumper sticker was born right here. Well, and so you need something to drink during the summertime. And, you know, I was looking for those wines to drink during the summertime. Sure. So what the heck? Why not make them?
Yeah. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd love to go back a little bit now too, because I want to go through definitely understanding a little bit of how you learned, you know, the world of wine and what that looked like. But, you know, I want to jump into the stuff that I love also. Like, I mean, the big moment of like, before there was wine, there was this whole other world that you worked in. You know, and maybe we're not going to jump back completely, right. But I know that you were in the Navy, you were a lieutenant in the Navy, which I did not know. And I was like, really? It seems really different than where you're at today. You know, you worked in IT and I think a couple different organizations, doing some consulting work with Accenture, and like there was Oracle was connected to that, what you were focused on. I was like, it's so funny because I read that. I was like, oh, I know those things. Right. Like, I know that. That's my past, you know, things of that sort. So I'd love to know this like maybe take us back starting to like before wine, you know, maybe right before, like what was your world then? Obviously the IT, but what did that look like for you? And then kind of build us up into, and how did you jump
or to change or shift?
I think it's sort of I think I'm going to start off and just say that it's sort of, it looks like a bunch of different stuff, but in some ways, all of those things that I did before wine make me a better winemaker. They've all been building towards my success, right? And so mostly what I was doing in IT is really different from what I'm doing in wine, except that I do manage our own website, right? Like, so I put that stuff together. God forbid I have to, write any code, but it's still,
right.
That's
why they created WYSIWYG.
Exactly. That's so but it all kind of leads to that spot. And then the journey to get there, it was kind of long and slow. It's, I think it starts with, being interested in wine. And so, when I was in the Navy, don't cry for me, I had a chance to go to France and Spain and Australia.
That does sound horrible.
I know, it's terrible. And all of those places, wherever I went, I went to wineries and we, I tasted wine, and I don't know if you heard, but sailors drink a little.
So I've heard.
Yeah. So I had some experience there, and I really enjoyed hitting wineries along the way. So there's kind of this little seed that's planted.
Okay.
And then I got out of the Navy, and so I was kind of in that time also, I started to really get interested in food too. So, it was, getting to be a better cook, learning more about different ingredients. That all became part of sort of the general level of background interest. And then I'm going to tell you, there's sort of, I was flying back from Hawaii. I'd gotten out of the Navy and tried to get a job in Hawaii for 8 months afterwards, and just nothing happening.
Yeah, that's tough over there.
It was, they're just, it was like in the early 90s and the economy sucked. And anyway, so I ended up, I was going back to the University of San Diego to get my MBA. And I was sitting next to somebody on the plane, and they were headed off to school too. And except their school, they told me they were going to go and study wine at UC Davis. And it's like I kind of did a mental head slap. Like, wine at UC Davis? What do you mean you can study wine? That's crazy. So, but then I went to business school, right? And I did my thing. But that, that chance meeting on the plane, I kind of kept coming back to that over time. And so then I started on the, I did my MBA. I went to work for Accenture. So I was back in the day when it was Anderson Consulting. And so we were, and I was doing that. And that brought me up to San Francisco and the Bay Area.
That's right. I saw that. Actually, I noticed that on... Oh, I read that in your bio. That's right. That's how you made it over here.
That's a well-written document right there, that bio.
It was. I was like, this is gold. I'm not going to trust it all because I like to look up everything else, but it was good.
Right. Was it all verifiable on the internet?
Which I did look that up. And I'm very good at that.
Good. All right. Now I have to be worried. So we made it up here, and I was doing IT, and that. IT can be, I found it to be a bit of a grind sometimes. I love the people.
When you say generally. IT though, help us out. Like, what kind of IT?
Well, so I think I first started off, I was test lead. So I was doing a lot of testing on Oracle projects. Like we're doing a big Oracle project down at Sun Microsystems. And I think that was my first real big gig with Anderson Consulting. And then, I did that stuff for a couple of years. I did some app development stuff.
So this is Cisco hardcore. This is hardcore IT. It wasn't just like network, desktop sort of. It was like you were like fully invested.
It was, and it was mostly that spot that I held was kind of like that. That guy that sits in between the business and the hardcore coders and translates stuff. And
did you have a background in that before?
You know what? I didn't. It was, but it's like everything I did in the Navy kind of prepared me for that. There was a lot of learning stuff very quickly. understanding how to solve problems,
Sure,
and then working with folks to try to get it done. Like that was kind of the, that was really the job.
okay.
I do a bunch of that now too.
I was like, when you said that,
like,
I was like, isn't that the same thing?
Right.
I mean, that's so great that you could take that. Right?
And it was, yeah, and it's sort of, it's just another, it's like, it's another building block. It's a piece of the Legos that kind of built the house that I live in today. And so, there was a lot of that going on. And then I was at the Gap in San Francisco. I was, an IT project manager there. And I think we were delivering some crazy reporting project, and and it was like,
you already lost me with reporting.
Right? No, your eyes rolling up in the back of your head? But it's super important for the business, and it was like it's how they drive their business, and God forbid you get it wrong. God,
right? And actually, in today's age, it's even more important because it's all about data.
It is, and so that was something that I was sort of thrown into, and God, for 3 years, you just had conversations. Maybe it was only 2. It felt like 8. But you'd have conversations with your partners about, well, this is what we need, and then the other partners, and well, I'm sorry, you can't have it. You can only have that, and you kind of go back and forth on that for a couple of years, and we finally got that delivered, and then I don't know, it felt like Monday morning we were going to start talking about release 2. And it was all the same, it was all the same arguments that we were going to have about release 1. We were just going to have them again for the next 2 years. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't looking that good to me. I don't know why it was, but that was
it's probably important to go through that, because I think so many people live that every day. Like what you just said, I was like, yep, I've been in those meetings before.
Yeah.
And there's actually nothing wrong with it.
No.
It just has to be your shtick to be in it.
And I think, one way to look at it is that, there are things that come up every day in our little wine project. And it'd be really easy to just sort of give up and walk away. But I love it too much to let that happen. And I think maybe that's the takeaway, is that when you're not like, screw it, I'm going to Hawaii, and you actually kind of work through the problems, and you get back up on the horse and you keep going, that maybe that's one way that that you found something you're supposed to be working on.
Right.
And then I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So meanwhile, there's all this like, while this IT stuff is going on, I met my wife at Accenture, and she's amazing. And we're living in San Francisco, so we're going to wine country and doing wine tastings, and so that little seed that got planted, in the Navy on that flight back to San Diego, like that starts to grow a little bit. I'm like, man, that's kind of cool. Wish I could figure out how to do a little bit more of that. And I don't know if you ever took like the Strong Campbell interest inventory when you were in high school. Did you ever take that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, it doesn't say winemaker. Like there's nothing on there. Like there's no job. Nobody in America wakes up in the morning, with a little piece of paper that says, "Oh yeah, you should go be a winemaker," right? And so I had no idea how to get from where I was to there.
Yeah,
but I had this kind of interest growing, and then. 2002, my brother-in-law kind of said, "Hey, we're thinking about planting some grapes on our property in Sonoma. Do you want to? What do you think? Do you want to go in on it with me?" And I was like, "Yeah, oh yeah, that's what I want to do."
Yeah.
And so we did a little research, and then I started reading books, because there are books on how to do that stuff. And we were off to the races. He had a friend, Ishmael, who kind of helped him figure it all out, helped me figure it all out, really taught me most of what I know about vineyards. Okay. And especially the kind of the actual physical, this is what you have to do to make it all kind of work. So I'm just going to throw it out there. Like it takes a village to make this transition.
When you say that too, is that specifically around wine, you think, or is it just this transition of going from something that's really different to kind of moving yourself?
I think it's everything. I think it's, I guess it doesn't have to, but for me, there were so many people that were instrumental in that journey. And, at the time, I'm not sure that I recognized that they were instrumental in the journey. It's not like you're going to say, oh yeah, that's the guy that I just learned a ton of stuff from. And, and in some ways really, that really colored the first few steps of my journey. Like, you don't know that. When
you would probably know, like, in the moment, like, gosh, this is really helpful, or it was a smart guy or whatever.
Yeah.
But you probably don't know until hindsight that was a pivotal moment. I needed that part so badly.
The rearview mirror totally helps with that perspective.
Yeah.
So as we were doing this, so 2002, we planted this little vineyard, and it was like Christmas. Like, every time I would get to go and work on the grapes, it'd be Friday night, get home from doing the thing, and I'd be like, yes, I get to go tomorrow. And my wife's like, oh my God, I gotta go. I don't want to prune any more grapes. And it's 500 plants, but it's enough to keep you busy.
Yeah.
But for me, it was just fantastic. And I wasn't really getting that much from work at that point. Like,
and you
we
were
in that.
So you were still there.
So still a gap, still kind of doing the thing, pushing the rock up the hill. So it could roll down the next morning.
The reporting rock.
Yeah, the reporting rock. And then we got to the end. It got to be, the grapes are going. Oh, and so probably that 2002, I started making grape wine in the garage too. So Ishmael, he was the vineyard manager over at Leveroni, and after the pick goes through, so after the vineyards are commercially picked, they pick them at deep dark at night, so there's always a little fruit left on, and he let us go over and kind of pull what was left off of the vines, and it was enough to get started. And I think I made my first Merlot in 2002 before Sideways ever came out. There was no Sideways yet, so Merlot was still cool. And we made it, and I made it in my garage, and I think I still have a bottle. Next time you come over, I'll give you a sip. I'm a little scared of it, but it was all right.
Especially for your first time, you have to use that hindsight as well to be like, remember when I didn't really know much.
Remember when I was clueless, and but and so in the background, there's this thing happening. Like, so there's the interest is growing a little bit. I'm learning a little bit more about it. I'm started getting excited about it. So kind of doing it as a hobby. And then in 2004, end of 2003, it kind of came to a head, and we started thinking about, God, the reporting thing's coming to its end. There's this whole other like next phase of that coming along, and I'm not kind of excited about. And Joni kind of said, that's my wife. She's kind of said, hey, you know what? You seem to really enjoy this. Why don't you explore it a little bit? And she had a friend, Karina Trowbridge, whose brother Derek was the winemaker at Old World Winery up in Healdsburg. And he was kind enough to spend a couple minutes talking with me about how do you get there? Like, what do you need to do to become a winemaker? If you want to do this commercially, how do you get there? And Derek gave me some great advice. He sort of, so there's a couple ways, you can kind of start at the bottom and work your way up and learn on the job. Or you can kind of go to wine school, and when you go to wine school, you get to start in the middle and then kind of work your way up. And, being the guy who likes to take shortcuts, I was immediately like, oh yeah, I want to start in the middle.
Yeah. Well, who really wants to start on the bottom?
Like, who really wants to start at the bottom?
That's the point where you do stuff if you think, oh, I really need to learn that way, or there are other options.
Right. And we'll get back to that in a minute, but it was, and Derek said, but the first thing you have to do, no matter what, is you have to go work a harvest. I was like, oh, work a harvest. What do you do? He's like, well, every year in September and October, wineries need a ton of people to come and help, and they won't pay very much money. But you'll find out whether winemaking is really something that you want to do. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, I could do that. So
before you go on, can I pause you for a second though?
Quit my job.
I was like, wait, there's this, because if your wife was the one that said, hey, maybe you should, did you have kind of any kind of aha moment yet at this point? Or was it like, this sounds really interesting. I know I'm really interested in this. I'm thinking about it, but I'm not really sure yet what I'm getting myself into. Let me test it. I mean, was there, or were you like, no, okay, it's on?
You know what? I'd been thinking about it for a long time, and asking those questions. Is this thing right for me? Like, I think, I kind of knew that the IT project management stuff wasn't going to be my long-term goal. And, it was kind of scary to sort of think about that transition from, being a pretty solid breadwinner to being not that anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And there's nothing about wine where people are making bank, except, maybe if you're a corporate executive, you're making bank, but I'm betting that you would be making bank if you were a corporate executive for an insurance company,
anywhere.
Even better than in a wine company. So, it's, so that was kind of scary. And I think I have to say that, that without Joni's support, I would have never done it. I would have never turned it from being a hobby into what I do. And probably from an economic decision, it was a terrible idea. But
yeah, I'm actually glad you said that. I think that's so good because it's, you can't let that get in your way sometimes.
No.
If it's, because, you have that on one side, you have the, well, I could continue doing this IT work or something similar. Do you hate it every day or do you just not love it? And it can be frustrating at some moments. Maybe I'm projecting there, like just from my past. Not that I haven't loved my career of stuff I've done, but, I've been in those. I've actually worked in a department that just did reporting.
Right.
I was not the reporter, so I was like, oh yeah. But you have this other side too of like, you have a hobby, but you're so fascinated by it that if you would have thought too much about the economic piece, if you were really honed on that, you probably wouldn't have gone that route. I don't know, but
I did not do that spreadsheet until later.
Yeah.
And I think, I believe that it's important to go into it with your eyes wide open, but at the same time, I was not a happy guy when I was kind of doing the reporting stuff. And I probably wasn't that great a husband, and I probably wasn't as good to my kids as I could have been. And I think Joni kind of saw, hey, you know what? It's God, God love her, because she kind of looked at it and said, it's more important for us and our family that Gary's happy and, kind of a contributing member to our family rather than being kind of a jerk. And and so I think she saw the wine thing as from a life perspective, it was a better choice than kind of living the grind, which is sort of what it was going to be, staying on the current path.
That's so good, so smart though. I mean, because she had like this big picture of like what's really valuable.
I wish I was that smart. I mean,
well, first of all, I think you probably are. But even look at your hindsight. I mean, now you can see that and say that. I think a lot of folks don't quite get there yet because you have the mortgage, you have the kids, you have the, what are my options? I want to be happy, but what does that look like even? Or what can bring me that?
Well, I mean, and we're lucky. Joni, we met at Accenture. We both had nice jobs. Mm-hmm. But I think that kind of what she realized when she was helping me make that transition was that she was signing up for a life where, we kind of had a shared financial responsibility, and we were moving to this thing where, she was kind of paying the bills, like especially for the next, I don't know, foreseeable future, like 5 years, 7 years. I mean, and then starting a winery, you know, that ain't exactly like a super bill payer right up front either.
Right.
So
yeah, that's an investment in time investment.
Yeah, it's sort of, you know, I think, so I give her a lot of credit for helping me kind of, to help me make that leap, you know, for the support, for the, you know, and I'm not sure permission is the right word, but it kind of fits in there too. It's like you know, it's just, you know, as a family, we can go in this direction and that's okay. And that was super important. And then we were off, then I was off like a rocket. So it was,
let's go back then to, because I definitely want to talk through like from, you know, I know you had to do this harvest thing, which I am curious about what your experience was there. And then going through also, tell us how you really started to jump in all in.
So it you know, it starts with the day you walk in and you say, I'm quitting my job. I'm going to go be a winemaker. And for me, so the start of that, I was like, I heard Derek and I was like, oh, go back to school. I was like, okay, I can do that. I've got some degrees. I'm feeling overeducated. So I did. So I enrolled in prerequisite classes at college in Marin. And it turns out in order to get into Davis to study wine, you have to know a lot of science. And I didn't remember any of it. So I started in kind of a general chemistry class. And I hated chemistry when I was in high school and college. I was like, oh man, what's this going to be like? But then I kind of figured out that wine is all about chemistry. Like that there's this huge piece of winemaking that's all about chemistry. And all of a sudden chemistry was really interesting to me. And I was good at it. And I was killing it in that class. And the guy behind me, he wasn't, you know, he was a really nice guy. And so I started helping him with his homework a little bit, but it turns out he ran the filter at Ravenswood and he was dating the enologist. And so
I'm so glad you're telling the story. Cause I had this, I was like, I was going to hit on this cause I love that part of it.
And I mean, it's just so, you know, how did I get where I am? Serendipity. But Chris is a great guy. And oddly enough, the enologist's name is Chris too. And so Chris and Chris were dating. And I was kind of doing okay in chemistry, and Chris hounded Chris until she gave me a job working in the lab at Ravenswood. And so that was kind of how I got my first harvest job was, you know, I came in, I interviewed, I wasn't a complete doofus. And all of a sudden I had my transition from, you know, and starting at, you know, $13.50 an hour or something like that. And
how long were you in school at this point? I mean, like until you built that relationship enough where that happened? I
want to say it was like December, maybe, springtime. It's like the total wrong time of year to start this, the thing. So I want to say I was maybe back in school and taking care of the kids and kind of being happy and like skating a little bit. And then the Ravenswood, kind of the internship there came along in, you know, like August, I think is when we started.
Okay.
And so it was, there's probably 6 months of, cracking the books before I got back into.
It's not terribly a long time. You know, I think I was looking at this as also trying to understand where you're quitting your job, you're in school, like, is this new journey going to feel like if we said, in a couple of years down the road, I mean, you could lose hope at this point.
Well, the good news is that, well, I don't know. It's if any of your listeners are out there and they need a low-paying job in the wine business, let me know because I can help you get one. There are lots of them. There's especially, you know, September, October. You know, that's the staffing goes from, you know, 1 or 2 up to 12. You know, it's sort of there's a huge need for people to come out and help just during that one specific time. And it's totally glamorous. You're like, you know, you're dirty and purple and sticky, and you start at 5 and you finished at, you know, 11 o'clock at night.
You got to sell it about an experience.
I know.
It's the real wine country experience.
It is the real wine country. I mean, it is the real wine. It's almost like riding around a limo and tasting wine, except that you never see a vineyard. You only see the inside of a tank.
Right.
You're dirty and tired and purple. But
except for you're not doing any of those other things.
Right. Any of the stuff that like makes it sound kind of sexy. Yeah, you're not doing any of that.
That's our honeymoon. Totally.
Right.
Like, yeah, that's how, yeah, you could sell it that way.
But I loved it. I mean, I couldn't, it was sort of, I think when Derek first told me that, he's like, yeah, this guy's been doing IT. He's a total knucklehead. He wants to sip wine and walk in the vineyard, and he thinks that that's what it's going to be like. So, get a bit of reality before you make your life all about this.
Smart.
And I kind of dug it. I really liked the reality, and it was just fantastic. It was such a great experience. It was, I would start in the morning at like 5 a.m, and my job would be to take the sugar and temperature on all of their fermenting tanks. And so I got to taste every wine that Ravenswood made every day during that first year. And so I had this kind of overview of what the wines were doing. And, I saw that I tasted stuff that was phenomenal. I tasted stuff that was terrible. It was just a great experience to kind of get a big picture of how this wine is being made, like how it's getting put together. And then, I got lucky. I worked hard. I kept my nose down, and after harvest, they asked me to stay on. So, again, this is one of those things where, I'm indebted to Chris probably for the rest of my life, because I learned so much from her, and she kind of gave me this opportunity. I got to keep learning while I was still going to school. And so they kept me on full and part-time for, God, I don't know, 3 years or something, like 4 years, while I was, while I finished getting prerequisites done, and then went to Davis. So the good news, and I didn't get into Davis. Like the first time I tried in 2004, I had all my applications in. I said, no, thanks. Come back come back later.
That must have been tough.
That was hard, right? Because here I just given up the job. We were sort of a year into the transition, and the rejection letter from Davis comes in. I was like, damn, that sucked.
Yeah.
And so I went and I talked to the counselor at Davis and figured out what I had to do. And I had to take a couple more classes, and it was sort of, then they would look at me later once I'd had those done. And they kept me on at Ravenswood. And so while I was back at school, even with some breaks where like, I think I took organic chemistry in the summertime. Was it like 2005, something like that? Like 3-week class, it was organic chemistry from 7 a.m. until 11 o'clock at night. It was, that was probably the hardest class I've ever taken.
Yeah, that's a long time.
That's a lot of organic chemistry. And like, so I wasn't working that, but then they're like, okay, well, take that off and then come back and we'll let you work after that too. And it was just, they were so good to me.
Is that, do you think was part of maybe part of the formula of what kept you also interested? Because this is over multiple years that you're doing this,
Yes.
So it's a total reinvestment of, your career, your passion, everything you're looking to do. You have to do it in a really different way. So is that like even just working in the industry as you're going to school and kind of churning through this new world? Is that kind of what helped keep you going, toward a larger goal?
I think that that being able to do those two things together was a lifesaver for me. Because I think if you're, sometimes when you're just in school and you've got kind of a theoretical idea of how things work and how they happen, I think you don't always really understand what that means. And so I kind of felt like I was on this roller coaster ride, I don't know, fire hose, whatever you want to look at, right?
Sure,
it's sort of, but I was getting the theoretical and the practical kind of all at the same time. And that's pretty rare. Like, I don't think a lot of people get to do that. And so back to Derek's point about, well, start in the middle or start at the bottom. But, I thought I was starting in the middle, but really I was kind of starting at the bottom, right? And in hindsight, like I think that doing the work in the lab and doing the work in the cellar and knowing how all of the theoretical things that you're learning in class, eventually, I wasn't sort of taking any high-level winemaking classes at that point, but knowing those things and then experiencing them in school and sort of learning how you're, why it is that you do punch downs or cap management, or like once you start talking about, the physical engineering in a winery and biochemistry and biology and all those kinds of things, once you learn how those, you get the physical part, but then you've also been doing it in the winery and you're like, oh yeah, that's why I'm doing that.
You can apply it almost instantly.
Yeah.
I would even imagine you could probably even ask about it then to the folks that you're working with, like, maybe there's just something that I've heard about, and then see like, how does that really work here?
And the folks at Ravenswood were just fantastic about it that way. They're always open to answering questions. And I think that from a cultural perspective, like that's one of those things that that just about everywhere that I've worked in the wine business is that people are really open with their knowledge. Usually they're open with their time. So if you have a question about how something is, why is that fermenting that way? Why does it taste like that? Why are you doing it that way? People, they'll tell you. And it's kind of it's not like there's any, at least in my experience so far, there haven't been any like big, deep, dark secrets where like, oh yeah, I'm not going to tell you that because, then you'll know the answer. Right. And then you'll be able to make that same wine there's never been any of that. It's always been people who are totally willing to share. And
that's interesting. When I first met you, that's actually what I realize your style is as well. Like you are, and I don't know if you know that about yourself or if that's something you're trying to offer anyways, but just talking about the wines, but you're offering all this different knowledge, obviously at a different level to me versus somebody who's in the industry. But it's interesting you say that because I was like, oh, that's kind of who you are as well. You're very free and open and welcoming about that.
I think I think I've had such a good time learning all this crap, and it's been such a cool, fun journey for me as I've learned this stuff. I could talk about it all day. I mean, it's sort of, I love to share it.
Well, tell me a little bit more about, I'm taking you off your story a little bit, but I'd love to circle into that, staying true to your vision. Like even as you're going through your Ravenswood, and I know that you've been at a couple other places and then moving into starting your own thing. What kept you on your vision? What is it that, and did you know that your vision was, I'm going to do my own thing?
I think in the back of my mind, I've always known that I wanted to do my own thing.
Okay.
So that's been kind of a goal the whole time. And one of kind of through that journey, one of the things that I kind of learned, or at least the way I started looking at it, was that making wine is a little bit like apprenticing in a kitchen, right? It's like if you're going to be a chef, if you can learn from some really great chefs, you can work in a couple of different restaurants, learn some different techniques and how they think about food, then you're going to be a better chef in the end. Mm-hmm. And winemaking is the same way. It's the guys at Ravenswood, they had their specific style, and I learned so much from them. But I was enologist at Costa Brown for a little bit. I was kind of lucky enough to get there after Davis, and that's one of those places where lightning struck. Like Michael Brown and Dan Costa, they're such great guys. And the folks that I worked with there were just phenomenal. And I learned so much from Michael about winemaking, and so much from Shane Finley, who was the associate winemaker that hired me. And he hired me, by the way, not because I had a phenomenal resume, but because I'd been in the Navy. It was like one of those things where he loved to hire veterans. And, I had a nice resume, but all the 100 other people that applied for that job had a nice resume too.
Sure.
And I'd been in the Navy, and he valued that. And God, what a door opener that was.
So interesting. I think that goes back to your original point that you had said, like, all these things kind of prepared me. Because maybe it's not maybe that's a little bit of luck because of, he happens to, like veterans, but there's a connection there, like maybe you needed to go through that to even get here.
Right. It is. It's like you can't get from point A to point B.
You can't start in the middle back to your original.
I know.
Story,
I wanted to.
right?
I was so ready. Start in the middle and work my way to the top. And then, so you got to remember, like, all this time, like, I'm working during harvest and I'm making wine in the garage. Like, I'm working in our little vineyard and, every free minute during harvest. And then, on weekends and stuff, I'm working in the vineyard up in Sonoma and trying to figure out how to do it on my own.
Yeah. Okay.
And making wines in the garage. And some of those wines I made in the garage were terrible. Oh my God. Like, it's like I always knew that I wanted to get to the point where I was doing my own thing. And honestly, making it in my garage and sort of doing it as a hobby, as I was doing it professionally, it let me make a lot of mistakes really early. Things that would totally sink the ship before we had invested,
I see.
a huge amount of savings and a bunch of money in it. So I was doing the hobby side of it as I was doing the professional side. And I think that helped me stay true to where I was going. I want to be doing my thing. And then, with at Dutton Goldfield, I kind of had the same thing. It's like I got in there and I was learning so much from Dan. He's such a talented winemaker and just totally driven, and exacting about what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that, and then at the end of it, I was like, man, there's more that I want to do, and that's kind of where I think I got to the point where I felt like I had enough knowledge that we could maybe get started, and and a life event, right? So we had our kids are, I think. In 2012, the kids were in, the middle of elementary school, and Joni was working, I don't know, pretty consistently 60, 70 hours a week.
Wow.
And I was working pretty consistently 60 or 70 hours a week. And it kind of started to feel like maybe things weren't working that well at home. It's like, just that other people were hanging out with our kids more than we were hanging out with our kids.
Yeah.
And so it became kind of an equation like, okay, well, I think that giving up Joni's job, which is keeping a roof on our heads and food on the table, is maybe not that smart. But maybe there's something I could do in the wine business. Like maybe it's time to make that second jump, right? Not, going from career switching into starting our own thing. And again, I mean, it's something that sort of, I think that we probably made the decision. It's something that I'd wanted to do for a long time, to take that second leap. But I think we made the decision at the time, partially because of family too. Because, when you start making wine, it's not necessarily a full-time job, right? I made 250 cases in 2012. And that's not a ton, right? So I had plenty of time to spend with the girls. For the first 18 months, you don't really have anything to sell. So you don't have to spend too much time thinking about marketing. So it's kind of a gradual ramp up from that respect. And so I think that we made that decision partially to help with the family, partially because we knew that that's where we wanted to go.
Kind of makes sense. It's almost the same reason you moved out of IT was to be happy and was part of the family, and it was maybe a little bit different angle to it, but it's kind of still following that same vision of where you wanted to be.
And then it's sort of, then the rock starts rolling downhill, and it starts rolling pretty fast. So, over the course of the last 4 years, we're up to like 800, 900 cases now. We're, we're beyond selling to just our friends. We're like, we've got distribution in California. We're at some great restaurants. Like our 2012s are on the list at Bouchon in Beverly Hills. It's like we've had some really good success, and it keeps building. And so that's kind of, that's been a whole other journey too, right? There was sort of the first journey where we're kind of getting into the world where I was getting into the world of wine. And the second one where we're kind of building this winery thing. And so it's taken everything that I learned, for 8 years. And then all of a sudden, this whole other set of things that I've had to learn. Mm-hmm. So like over the course of the past 4 years, it's been, I know how to make wine, but I didn't know how to sell it.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to market it and meet people and talk about it and how to get scores or if it's important or, how to design a label. And like, there's this whole other complete side of the business that I just had no vision.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been the fire hose in the last few years, has been about kind of learning this whole new thing. And
I love that you bring that up though, because it was, so you followed this passion. You're like, I'm going to jump right in. I'm doing all this stuff, but wait, there's so many other things I still don't know. I think that's a good realization for anybody who thinks about even doing something like this, if it's wine or some other business, that there are many things you were not going to know in that space. Things you may not want to even care about.
Thank God for YouTube.
Right? Especially now. So I think that's a really good point to say, hey, follow all that stuff, but don't be surprised along the way.
Right. And don't give up too, right? That was sort of the, there are obstacles that get thrown in the way. All throughout the process. Like we haven't talked about him too much, but that first rejection letter from Davis, like that could have been a deal breaker.
Yep.
And the, kind of the, when I was leaving Dutton Goldfield, like that wasn't an awesome, that wasn't an awesome time for me. Like, that could have been an opportunity to get back into IT or something, right? It was sort of, that was a hard transition. Or in 2011 when our first vintage that we'd contracted for, you can shake the vine and all the grapes just fall off of it.
Yeah.
It was terrible. And so, I think having some perseverance and just, keep solving the problems. It's like when stuff comes up, don't give up. And I think that's, one of the ways that you'll know that you're doing, at least on the right track is that you don't want to, right?
Right. That's the difference.
You want to keep going. So that's not enough to throw you. Like you can keep following your dream. It's like you get back up on the horse and you keep going.
For the folks that are listening, if they wanted to follow along or learn more about your wine, where online should they go?
So we got a website, brooksnotewinery.com. So it's, you can catch us there. You can sign up for our email list there if you'd like. You can find us in some stores around Marin, and we can ship to places around the country. So,
super.
Look us up there.
Yeah, I'd say that too. And I know you guys are doing some social things as well, but maybe that's a little bit lighter.
Yeah, we're out on Facebook. And so you can. I usually post if I'm going to be pouring somewhere. There's something new kind of happening at the winery, or having a party. I'll usually put it out on Facebook too.
Okay, great.
And that's Brooks Note Winery.
And we'll make sure that we link to it as well,
you.
with the information on our website. Well, Garry, this has been great. I love that you've gone through the story, and I even learned a couple new things that I didn't know.
That wasn't on the internet.
No, that wasn't on the internet, nor had you shared with me before. So this has been super. Thanks for sharing this.
Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed talking about it.
Good. I'm glad. Hopefully you'll get some people that try your wine after this.
Yeah, come by, drink some. It's all good.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks.
Now, over to you. Any thoughts or questions you'd like to share? Seriously, do you have any questions you'd like to ask me or the guest? We'll answer them and even get the guest to help us. So send us a message, use our Facebook page and email us there, or post a comment or question on the page, or tweet us at accidentalinfo using hashtag LivingYourJourney. You can find out more about all the guests, links to their sites and social channels, and even bonus content all at accidentalinformation.com. Now, a couple favors. Go subscribe to the show and you'll be the first to get the download before everyone else. Also, take just a couple moments and head over to the show in iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a quick review. Quick, easy, and I would love it. This totally supports us and it helps me bring in interesting guests each week and keeps the show going. Also, I love to read them and see what you guys are really thinking. Thanks for joining the conversation, and remember, Living Your Journey is available every Tuesday. Until next week.